Podcasting is more than just talking. It's listening. BSing with Bob Schmidt.
The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast featuring entrepreneurs, business people, and marketers. And with me this week is an entrepreneur, a marketer, a business person, an author, a podcaster. Ravi Jayagopal is joining me. You're an author. Your latest book is the How to Reach a New Audience of 30 plus million listeners with Alexa Flash Briefing. And it says the subcontent is created in an hour if you already have a podcast, a week if you don't. So truly I could reach 30 million people within an hour because I already have a podcast?
No, that's always the potential, right? It doesn't say guaranteed to reach 30 million. There's no guarantee, right? Even if I put a billboard right in front of your house, after like the first, second day, you're going to start ignoring it because it's just there. That's why billboard marketing doesn't work, because you have to have enough people passing by it. They have to look up from traffic. They have to see it. They have to understand it. They have to take action. So there's even a billboard in a crowded traffic area is still not a guarantee of any kind of audience building. But it's a start. When you know that there are, how many over few hundred million podcast listeners, and when you know there are a few billion people downloading videos on YouTube, there are 30 plus or 40 plus million Alexa users. So you know the size of the audience, and you start creating content for them. Now I go into a lot of detail about in the podcast, in the book, about it's not just simply taking your existing podcast and cutting it down into a few minutes and putting it on a flash briefing. Because imagine if Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel or any of these top comedy shows, if they took if they took their existing show and just without any thought or preparation, just randomly cut it into 5, 10 pieces, you won't be watching it, right? Because there's introduction, then there's this random talk, there's the small talk, there's all these things. So they cut out just the interesting parts and they get right to it. With a podcast, you can afford to have an introduction, a flow, there's small talk and there's interaction and there's bond building and all this kind of stuff you can get away with on a podcast, but you cannot get away with the same thing on a flash briefing because people want it fast. So I go into all that in the book. But the bottom line is there's a huge potential out there, and existing podcast listeners, podcast publishers can do it a lot faster within an hour because you already figured out what is the feed, how do you create audio. You don't have to worry about what mic should I buy, what software. You already know all that stuff. So you're pretty much cutting right through the learning curve of everything that a new podcaster has to go through. And you can create content in 1 hour. You can have a flash briefing up and running in one evening, in literally 1 hour, because you already know the other stuff.
That's pretty cool. I'm definitely looking forward to trying some of that. One of your other books here is How to Promote Your Podcast, Reach New Listeners, Build an Audience, and Find Your 1,000 True Fans. And I think that a lot of people that have podcasts struggle to get, 10 or 20 or 15 or 100 true fans. How do you get that 1,000? How do you reach up to 1,000?
The same way you build up a bank account when you're 18 years old, right? $1 at a time. It's a long, again, it all comes down to whether you're just purely depending on organic traffic, because there's no such thing as discovery anymore. You don't get help with discovery with iTunes or Amazon or YouTube. YouTube is probably the best among discovery, because if somebody search for a very specific keyword, that if I created a YouTube video with talking a lot about flash briefings and stuff, then obviously there's more chance I have of being found out. But again, it comes down to YouTube is really smart, and I like the way they sort their search results, because they give it to me based on how many people have watched it, what's the popularity, how many fans are subscribed. So there's a whole bunch of clout involved in the results. Whereas on iTunes, it's the wrong kind of clout, because they say the podcast that you get back, a lot of them, if you search for membership sites, you'll find a bunch of podcasts that haven't released an episode in 3, 5, 7 years. Uh-huh. They should not be showing up over mine, right? Technically. But then iTunes says these are podcasts who have gotten overall lifetime subscribers more than you. That makes no sense. Because just because some website created 10 years ago got a lot of traffic at that point, but hasn't updated in forever, and all the content is outdated. They haven't published any blog posts or content in many years. They should
Right.
show up above my content, which is fresh, which is relevant, which has all the right signals, sending all the right signals to Google that this is superior content. So just because of somebody getting more traffic, they shouldn't show up at the top. So that's why Google is way smarter at search and everything else than Apple and even Amazon at this point. They know how to value the right signals.
Let me ask this about the about YouTube, because I do YouTube videos of my podcast, but all they are is the audio, because I use Spreaker for my hosting, and I can upload from there to YouTube. And so all of my podcasts are YouTube videos, but there's no video on there except for the photo that I post of my guest. Is that something that still is getting watched or still is getting found somehow?
Yeah, I mean it's one of those lowest of the lowest tiers, right? I call it the Brilliant 5 Law 95 method. So with everything, there's the Brilliant 5% at the top. Is paying for stuff, going to joint ventures, getting influencers to help you. All that stuff is falls in the Brilliant 5%. And then there's the blah 95% of other stuff that don't really move the needle much. But if you have the time, just go ahead and do it anyway. And YouTube, putting static videos of your audio with a static image of your podcast image or whatever, and uploading it to YouTube channel, does it help? Maybe. It's some audiences, their primary way of consuming content is videos, and it gives you just one more place to be found. But is that going to move the needle? You might pick up a few listeners here or there, and it again comes down to what are you promoting, right? If you are constantly telling people, if people are listening to your podcast, there's no point in sending them to your YouTube channel to watch the same thing on YouTube. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Without any, and the fact is podcasts are much more popular in terms of engagement is because people can do it while they're not at their screen and they're not at their computer. So if somebody has to sit in front of a YouTube computer, in front of a computer and watch a YouTube video, what good does it do? Because it's already a podcast, they can already listen to it via a real app. So there's very little. It's there. It's one of those things like those Facebook groups where dedicated to promoting your podcast. I call those hit and run posts. So everybody goes in there and says, okay, here's my podcast. Boom, they get out. Will you find? So anytime somebody says, hey, post your podcast link here, you'll probably find 500 people posting it, right? But are these people going and reading other people's content? Probably not. 99% may not. Maybe you might get that one listener who may go on to become your 1,000 true fan. So you don't say no, but is it worth your time and effort to keep posting on these hit and run posts in these groups that are just nothing but a echo chamber for everybody posting their own podcast episode, latest podcast episode, but they're not really checking out other people's content.
Is it possible for us to truly reach our 1,000 true fans? So, I mean, with me interviewing you, is that going to help me to build my audience, or is it going to help you to build your audience?
It depends, right? So there's two things to this. One is, how unique do you think the content is? Right?
Say that again. Say that again. How what with content?
How unique is your content?
Oh, okay.
And how much value is it adding to people?
Right.
So I can come on here, right? I'm trying to give you my best content, my best ideas, and whatever, I'm trying to not hold back and give you all the good stuff to prove to people, your listeners, that I'm worth their time and attention, and you should follow me and listen to what I have to say, and I want to spread my message to them. So that's one part that helps me. The other part that helps you is getting a guest who can provide value and is not sitting there just pitching their products and services, who can actually talk the talk and walk the walk, so to speak, and they can provide value to whatever your audience, whatever that value is you're promising to your audience, whether it is learning from entrepreneurs or what they have done or their journey. So whatever the niche is of your topic, then as long as you're providing value to them, they will keep subscribing to you and they'll stay subscribed. But whether you can monetize it, is a whole another thing. The same way, you might have, let's say you have 1,000 listeners, and maybe not everybody listens to this episode. Maybe only say 800 people listen, right? Because even though you may get the downloads, not everybody's listening. So 800 people listen. Not everybody is going to follow. Even though you mentioned my websites and my Kindle book and all this stuff, not everybody is going to go there and follow that and buy my stuff or join my list, listen to my podcast. So I may get 1% or 5% of your audience who may come to follow me, but from there, that doesn't mean I'm making any money from them. It just means that I have a foot in the door, and now it's still up to me to provide value, to show that I can provide information and education and training and entertainment to keep them engaged. And from there, it's a whole another journey from there to convert a follower into a customer. So there's no black and white way to say, okay, you publish so many episodes and people will follow you and pay you. It doesn't happen because like there are so many website podcasts about membership sites. There's so many podcasts, true crime podcasts. There's so many entrepreneur interview shows. So how do you set yourself apart? And then what's the call to action at the end of your episode? What's your goal? Is it to become the premier interviewer of entrepreneurs, or do you have your own products and services? Why would they follow you? What do they get from your podcast other than whatever the guest is providing? What is the value you provide? How do you monetize it? How do you build an audience? That's the key.
Let's segue to another book that you've written. You've written Confessions of a Wannabe Podcast Star. I like that. Podcast Star. Nice play on words there. So what is a confession? What are the confessions of a wannabe podcaster?
The basic, I dispel a lot of myths in that, and it starts with podcasting is not a business model. A lot of people get into podcasting. They look at all these podcasters who are saying, I make $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 from podcasting. And recently in a podcast movement presentation, I talked about a lot of that in showing how even the top guys who are making a lot of money, forget the Joe Rogans and all these top Gimlet media shows, they probably can't monetize it with products as easy as doing sponsors. But a lot of people think that just starting a Patreon account and money will start flowing in. That's not the case. So some of the myths I dispel are podcasting is not a business model. It's a content marketing tool. So at the end of the day, you have to have a business behind it. If you don't have a business behind it, what are you doing the podcast for? And if it's just a hobby, then that's fine. But if you have any expectations of making money, then you have to set the expectations correct, because you can't just release an episode or even 100 episodes and think money will start coming in. Everything has to be intentional, mindful. You have to market it. You have to promote it. You have to have calls to action. So, and then new and noteworthy doesn't do nothing for you because that list is a lot of newbies coming in will look at new and noteworthy, say, hey, if I do these things, I will get on new and noteworthy. That list hasn't worked in for like years, I think. And so there's no such thing as it's just a rainbow at the end of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I can't speak today. And so there's a whole bunch of things that new podcasters make mistakes, and I dispel all of those myths and set the expectations on how tough podcasting is. You are not, unless you're all in and you put your money where your mouth is, and you pay to promote, then you're not going to build an audience quickly. And to be honest, things like not everybody is going to care about your podcast, right? I'm sure there's a lot of people over the years, the 3 years of my podcast, have listened to me, and they probably didn't subscribe because they don't like the content, they don't like my accent, they don't understand my accent, they don't care about the topics I talk about, they don't care about my humor, they don't care about the training, and it's not a message to market match. So you just have to keep doing it. And one of the things that's going to help you as a podcaster is being able to say, I can create this content without any immediate expectations. So audience building is a whole subject that I go into, and all the topics I talk about is about creating an audience, monetizing an audience, the mindset that comes with being a creator, and how to mindfully structure your content where you're not just creating content all the time. You have to promote it. And a lot of podcasters are really bad at marketing. And talk about this I talk about this in one of my podcast episodes too.
Right.
That, there's the Flash Briefing is also available as a podcast at cuttothechase.fm. And one of the things I talk about is broke artist versus failed entrepreneur. So when you're an artist, your expectation is, I'm going to put my heart out there. I'm going to put my blood, sweat, and tears out there, and I'm going to create my best stuff. And people will find me, and they'll pay for it because I'm putting out so much stuff. I'm starving here. I don't have a life. I'm doing so much work, and I'm putting my heart and soul into this, and people will appreciate that.
Right.
Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Right.
Well, if it happened, then we'd all be rich, Ravi. If that were to actually happen.
Exactly. So somebody who's really good at cooking can't automatically think, if I start a restaurant and make great food, people are going to come and eat and pay, and they're going to tell their friends, and my restaurant will have a 100-person line outside the door. Well, guess what? Restaurants have the highest rate of failure among any business because they're one of the hardest businesses to run, because there's perishables and people coming in and churn out, and rude waiters and waitresses, and people not taking care, and then your cook didn't come, now you're scrambling. So when you think there's a difference between an artist and an entrepreneur, which is why when an entrepreneur fails and their business their business shuts down, they don't call them starving entrepreneurs. They call them failed entrepreneurs. But when an artist fails, we call them a starving artist. And which is why I also had one clip in my podcast movement presentation. If you go to my website, subscribeme.fm, you can find it at some place, or send me an email. And one of the things is, there's this guy in I think it was 2007 or 2008. It's this Washington subway station. He's playing the violin, right? He has a mat in front of him, and in the corner he's playing the violin, and you can see all these people passing by. A couple of these people toss a few coins, but they just keep walking, right? And at the end of the day, he made like $30 or something, right?
Right.
And turns out that guy, his name is Joshua Bell, one of the biggest violinists. He has a violin that costs, several $1 million. I think it's like $1.5 or $3.5 million violin. And he had just a couple of days prior to that, he had sold out a show with minimum ticket of $100 a ticket. So it comes down to positioning. The same guy who probably earned $1 million 2 nights ago, playing the same music, it's the same guy, same violin, $1 million violin, same music. He goes and plays in the subway, he gets $30, right? So it comes
right.
down to positioning. It's how you position yourself, how you position the content, how you position your own mindset in your head. Are you just an artist who wants to be left alone and let me do my thing, leave me alone with all this marketing stuff, and you just give me money so I can go and create amazing stuff? It doesn't work. That's why there are so many people playing on the subway,
right?
And very few people playing at Madison Square Garden, right?
Right. Well, hey, let me ask you this, because you kind of hit the nail on the head and kind of brought me up to this next question. Is with the example of the guy that was playing in the subway, then a couple days before was playing in the sold out Madison Square Garden. With you and me having this conversation right now, is it hard for you to be on the other side of the interview? So instead of being the interviewee or an interviewer, you're the interviewee?
No, I prefer being the interviewee, because I have so much to say, right? I have so much knowledge. I have accumulated so much knowledge, wisdom, and experience, and I've taken so many hits, and I have failed so many times. So I don't have enough time to tell people and help them know what I know. I wish I could do a brain dump and brain transfer. I could just wire from my head to everybody's head and just dump everything so that they can do things better and not do the mistakes I made. I wish I could do that. So I have very limited time in calling people and spreading my message and helping people the way I can. Now, obviously, I'm never going to be a Tony Robbins or Tim Ferriss. I'm never going to have millions of followers, millions of downloads. But I'm trying to, I call myself a D-list superstar, right? And I'm not an A-lister like Tim Ferriss. I'm not a B-lister. So in one of my podcast episodes, I talk about this. It's okay to be a D-list superstar because, you can create a great lifestyle by not necessarily aiming to always be A-listers. That's one of the mistakes podcasts and anybody creating a new content channel. That's one of the mistakes they do. They try to go right for the A-lister, right? Start with the B-list superstars. You're much better getting a Ravi Jayagopal on your podcast, giving phenomenal value than trying to go straight for a Tim Ferriss and be told no. And as much as we say, don't worry about people saying no, it's okay. You can go ahead and try to get a Seth Godin or Tim Ferriss or Tony Robbins, but you have better chance of success with people who are willing and want to be there and at the same level as you and want to take the opportunity and are grateful for the opportunity and who will come in and provide a lot of value to your audience because they care about people and they care about spreading the message and not just pitching products.
Ravi, let me ask you this, and I know you said not just pushing products, but I do want to ask you about how do people find your products, because I know you've got website, I know you've got software, you've got books, you've got a lot of things out there. How do we go about finding you and finding out the answers to the questions that we may have that I didn't get the opportunity to ask?
My website is at subscribeme.fm, and it's also available as a podcast, so you can search the word subscribeme.fm as one word in your favorite podcast app or Spotify or pretty much wherever you can find podcasts. And at subscribeme.fm, I have my podcast player right at the top, so you can listen to it right there. And if you scroll down further, you can see all of my products and services and my software, my other podcasts, my ebooks, my Kindle books, my Digital Creators Academy, which is currently, I'm having a discount membership right now. So everything about me, whether you want to contact me, my Twitter accounts, my Facebook, my Instagram, every single thing can be found at subscribeme.fm.
The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast is brought to you by Orange Computer. Find them online at orangecomputerlax.com. And by Tri-State Sound and Light. Find them online at tristatesound.com. Tell your story with microcasts by podcastforhire.com. The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast is a podcast for hire production.